She's a senior special agent for the United States government. Her investigations include the attacks on 9/11. She's a 5th-degree black belt in judo, a highly respected sensei, and she was on the U.S. National Judo Team and won several medals in international tournaments. And she's coming up. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. What is the Newsbreak app, and why should you follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app? Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Calling us from New Jersey, we have Dr. Gene Kanakogi on the phone. Do I call you Doc, Dr. Gene? What's the proper terminology?
Well, you can call me anything as long as you don't call me late for dinner. But Gene is fine, Dr. Gene, whatever you want. Dr.
Gene, I'm going to call you that. You are a fascinating character. You are a woman of huge accomplishments, and I thank you for coming on the show. Rather than butcher your resume, because it's extensive, give people a brief rundown, your background, where you come from, your law enforcement resume from start to finish.
Oh, boy. Let's see. My background, I'm born and raised a Brooklyn girl, regular old Brooklyn girl. And I grew up in the sport of judo with both of my parents as judo instructors. And how that plays into how I started shaping my lens on how I saw things as a kid is I grew up in our dojo, which is our judo school, that was in the middle of Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. So my judo family, my brothers and sisters, were every culture and ethnicity you can think of, from Irish to Haitian to Jamaican to Asian, you name it. That's what I grew up in the true melting pot of Brooklyn. I was also a member of the U.S. Judo Team, and I'm a 5th-degree black belt in judo. I went to John Jay College of Criminal Justice for my undergrad and my grad, and I'm probably going to miss a whole bunch of things and skip around a little bit. Fast forward, I got into law enforcement. I was selected to make a choice, the New York City Police Department or Legacy U.S. Customs. And back then, my mom, who was my mentor and judo coach, who also happens to be the mother of women's judo, gave me some sound advice. 2 words, go federal. Didn't question it, didn't ask her, because usually when she told me to do something, aside from clean my room and do my homework, I listened. So I went federal, and I became a customs inspector with U.S. Customs. I worked out of Jamaica, New York, JFK, which at that time I almost felt like was the drug capital, the incoming drug capital of the world. And I got to see some really different have some different experiences and see things in a way that I never thought that I would see, because I grew up with such welcoming, warm people through athletics, through sports. I wasn't surrounded with nefarious type of individuals. I wasn't surrounded where I had to watch my back or be careful or worry about my safety or the safety of others. So getting into law enforcement, I started seeing some of the underbelly of society.
But that was a real shocker for you, wasn't it?
It certainly was. It started shifting my mind a little bit. I went from having these rose-colored glasses that everybody's a wonderful person, nobody wants to harm anybody. If somebody tells you something, it should be the truth, to knowing that, surprised that so many people will lie to you, sometimes just for the sake of being deceptive, for no other reason, not that they're concealing anything, but that they just don't want to tell the truth. And I know that's part of life as well, but in law enforcement, you get that significantly more than the average person gets lied to throughout their lifetime. And I found it to be very disconcerting, because I started being more suspicious of people. And all of a sudden, I go from this elite judo athlete to somebody who is having a responsibility of being suspicious to protect people from drugs or bad things coming into this country. And that burden started weighing on my shoulders. I started having to carry this responsibility, but I also started doing some soul searching because I didn't want to become that salty, angry, suspicious person.
By the way, and that's a stereotype that Hollywood loves to perpetuate. There's the old, we call them salty cops. There's the old salt that doesn't like anything. He's grumpy, he or she, and you can't tell them anything. They've seen it, done there, been there, got their shirts. They drink too much. They've got multiple divorces. They don't see their kids. They can't get along with anybody. And while that does occur, it's rare. It's not. It's more the exception to the rule than the rule.
I absolutely agree. First of all, I was going to joke and say, well, those were all my supervisors.
Yeah, exactly.
But because you know, it's not only that Hollywood portrays that, but it's so funny because people feel since Hollywood portrays that, I noticed that some of the guys that I worked with felt that that's what they had to live up to. That's what they had to become because that's what was expected of them to be, that salty, grumpy person who was unapproachable. And I would even correct some people sometimes and say, hey, that's not you. Why are you being so grumpy? And kind of snap them out of that Hollywood mystique. So one thing that Hollywood doesn't do such a great job of sometimes, not all the time, is showing the person behind the badge, behind the uniform, behind the when you pull out a firearm, whether you're at the range or if you actually have to pull out your firearm or use force or have a confrontation, believe it or not, the person behind the badge and the person in the uniform is terrified.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I remember going down some steps in I was looking for a fugitive, and I went down a dark stairwell because I got a lead that he was going down. He was somewhere in the basement. So my partner was on one side, I was on the other side. We had a team up top. And as I'm going down these steps, and I saw that it was dark and it was just dirty and dingy and something you would see in a movie, the first thing that I thought of, somebody should call the police. This is dangerous.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I can recall times like that. Like, what am I doing here? You mentioned a good point, and I qualify every year at the range, and I tell people I don't get nervous about a lot of things anymore. But when it comes to that, I always do. It's always like a pop quiz in high school, and you're not prepared. And I always do very well. And that's just firing at a paper target. It's not firing back at you. When you are in a real life-threatening, we have to make a decision, and the gunplay comes out, or could be possibly involving gunplay, it is horrifying, especially afterwards.
Absolutely. You know, after being a customs inspector at JFK, I actually became an agent, and we call that an 1811 U.S. federal agent. So, again, I had to go through an academy all over again, the criminal investigator training program, and then whatever add-on academies. And you go through hand-to-hand defensive tactics, control tactics, firearms training. And you're right, the paper target doesn't shoot back. But when you go through different labs and you actually have people shooting back at you, it's scary. And even if it's paint pellets, and I got plenty of welts, and anybody who went through the academy and dealt with the non-lethal training ammunition, I got plenty of welts from being shot at. But it's
I'm sure
terrifying.
You have plenty of welts also from your judo background. We're going to talk more with Dr. Jean Kanakogi about her law enforcement career, about investigating 9/11, about her mom, her judo background, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. This is the Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Learn how you can be ultra successful on Facebook and possibly earn an income from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com, letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Back to our conversation with Dr. Jean Kanakogi on the Law Enforcement Show. She's a federal law enforcement officer. I always get their positions and whatnot wrong, so I don't want to butcher it. We'll let her tell you about that. She's also a world-class judo competitor, part of the U.S. National Judo Team, won several medals in international tournaments. Her mom was known as, I believe, the mother of women's judo. Is that the correct terminology?
It is. It is. The reason we call her the mother of women's judo, well, first of all, anybody that knew Rusty Kanakogi knew she was a mother in several different ways, not just the mothering term. And that's a little bit of a Brooklyn accentuation on the word mother.
Yeah.
Well, Rusty grew up in Brooklyn in a tumultuous household with a father that gambled and drank and was absent, and a mom that got hooked on painkillers because she got her hand mangled in a factory she worked in Coney Island. So Rusty grew up on the streets and ran the boardwalk in Luna Park back in the 50s. Well, she got married young, and unfortunately she married somebody just like her dad during the first time she got married, and he ended up drinking alcohol, and she went to Al-Anon to meet other people to try to support him. But while she was at Al-Anon, she met another guy who worked out, and she was just very curious on what he did, and he told her that he did judo, and she had no idea what judo was. In the 50s, they didn't highlight too much of the Japanese sport and Japanese martial arts in America. So she went with him to the YMCA in Brooklyn and Prospect Park and watched the judo class, and she wanted to join. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let her in because they said, well, no women can come in. And she was big and she was strong. Just to circle back, she was a street gang leader. She ran the female gang, the Apaches, in Brooklyn. She was arrested and did time for boosting cars, and she got shot at and all sorts of trouble. So she needed something to harness her anger, her energy, and everything else. What she did is she actually got into that judo class. They made her change in a broom closet, but she earned her spot there. She learned the technique. She got her spot. And in 1959, she went to the Utica YMCA to support her team that was in a team competition, but her teammate got hurt, and they put her in his place. And she had short hair, so she ace-bandaged her breast, so nobody could tell any different, and they didn't expect her to win anyway. So the coach told her, just pull a draw. She pulled a draw. She went in to pull a draw, and in her head, she heard, well, wait a minute, women should be allowed to compete. And at that moment, she was fighting her opponent, and this guy was trying to rip her in pieces. Well, she won. She threw him for a full point unexpectedly, and she just pulled this right out of her hat and threw him for a perfect point. She won. They found out that she won, and they stripped her of her medal because they told her, well, I'm sorry, women are not allowed. From that point on, she said, oh, no, this is a horrible feeling. She felt that she did everything wrong just for being a woman. And she claimed that that was her pivotal moment when no woman will ever suffer such an indignity ever again. So she decided from there, women's judo needs to be equal, and subsequently, women's judo needs to be included in the Olympic Games.
That's a phenomenal story. She sounds like she's the type of person I would love to have a cup of coffee with, to be honest with you. And you co-authored a book about your mom. What's that called?
I did. It's called Get Up and Fight. And the reason why it's called Get Up and Fight is I can't even tell you how many times she used to tell that to me. Now, I'm not currently on the U.S. national team. I was back in the day, but she was my coach, and she was the national coach and the Olympic coach. So Get Up and Fight was just so appropriate. And not only did she fight for women's judo, but she fought alongside with Billie Jean King and the Women's Sports Foundation to fight for Title IX. And coming up next year will be the Title IX anniversary. Title IX is for women to have equality in sports. So her and Billie Jean King teamed up, and they really fought for equality. And Billie Jean King actually wrote the foreword for this book.
Such an amazing story about a truly amazing person. And not to take away from your story, because there's a lot, and people will find out in a moment, there's so much about you that is just mind-blowing. People like your mom, by the way, the whole concept of the title, Get Up and Fight, really resonates with me. In my career in law enforcement, I was taught from day one in the academy that if you are in a bad situation, no matter how bad, no matter how much you're getting your clock handed to you or cleaned by your opponent, no matter what it is, it's life or death. You got to fight. You cannot quit. You cannot give up. So this concept of get up and fight, I think applies to law enforcement and it applies to all walks of life.
It certainly does. This story is not just Rusty's story, but this story is her story to give because, first of all, it's written in her voice. So I was able to maintain, and it sounds like she's actually sitting with you, telling you her story when you're reading this book. And there's some very funny parts, typical Brooklynisms. You mix Japanese with Yiddish, and you get Rusty. And she wasn't Japanese. She was a Jewish-German woman from Brooklyn, but she married my dad, who happens to be Japanese. And I don't know if you remember the commercial, Kanakogi versus Samsonite. He was the karate guy that kicked out the luggage, the Samsonite luggage, and when he wasn't teaching judo, he was out making commercials.
I actually took judo for about 2 years at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. My sensei was a man named Hamada. I believe he's back in Japan now. And I can tell people I've never been physically worked out the way I was worked out by that man. And I was, and I still am in many ways, a big guy, and I was very headstrong, and they team me up with someone who was 40, 50 pounds lighter than me. I'd spar with them, and I'm thinking, I'm going to bend them like a pretzel. And they tore me up. It was using my movement, my strength, my mass against me, and that really applies very well in law enforcement. Those skills really carried over and helped me and helped save not just my life, but the life of the people attacking me.
Absolutely. Well, part of just going back to the book and how it ties over to a career in law enforcement, this book touches upon empowerment, survival. It gives you the inspiration to get up and fight. Just like you said, when, if your clock is being cleaned, you have to still get up and fight. You have to dig deep down inside and grab onto that true grit that you have and get up and fight. And sometimes, even if your get up and fight means getting dressed and getting out of bed, or if your get up and fight means going and doing something that you ordinarily wouldn't do, because what it does is it circles back into the resilience. You have to maintain a level of resilience. And this book, including how it spills over into my law enforcement career, is everything of resilience and shows that you don't have to be born in the spotlight and you don't have to be born somebody, and I'm using air quotes, somebody special. You can be an ordinary person and change the world for so many and change the lives for so many just by following your passion and following your dreams.
We're talking with Dr. Jean Kanakogi. She is a federal agent. She's also co-authored the book, Get Up and Fight. We're going to talk about her high-profile investigations, including events like the attack at 9/11 and much more. This is a law enforcement show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return to conversation with Dr. Jean Kanakogi on the Law Enforcement Show. I'll give you a brief, very brief, in a nutshell, look at her. She is a doctor. She's a PhD. She is a federal law enforcement officer. She has been part of the United States Women's Judo Team. She's competed in international tournaments. She's co-authored the book Get Up and Fight about her mother, the memoir of Rusty Kanakogi, the mother of women's judo in the United States, and so much more. And there's so much in your story that I think really exemplifies what a lot of our modern law enforcement officers are like nowadays. A lot of people have this stereotype in their mind, and it's, again, perpetuated by Hollywood, that we're dumb, can't get other jobs, and it's just not true. We have highly educated, multilingual, multi-talented individuals doing the role of law enforcement, and you're a great example of that.
Well, thank you. I think, blaming Hollywood, well, Hollywood does have a lot of power. And one of the funny stories is I was out in, I think it was Nebraska, and I was tasked to teach interviewing and interrogation skills to one of the local police departments. So I asked everybody, and I pulled the question, where did you get a lot of your interview and interrogation skills? And at first I thought they said this in jest, but they were very serious. They said TV.
Yeah. And
I paused and I said, well, what shows? So they told me Law and Order SVU or Law and Order shows or NYPD Blue, going back a little bit further. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, Hollywood does have to do a better job, because that's where some of these smaller police departments are learning their skills.
And we as the general public buy that, and we elect people, and not to get political because this isn't a political show, but we elect people based off of those things we learn from Hollywood about the way things should be. And that's not the reality of what it is. And I'll give you an example. Your background, you did international competition, so you traveled all over the world. Then you began to focus on a career in law enforcement, and you said earlier in the conversation, you began to get jaded. You didn't want to be that, salty old cop who was so negative, but you began to see sides of people and sides of violence that troubled you.
I did. I saw, I couldn't understand why people would swallow drugs to smuggle it into the country. And let alone, I couldn't understand why people would want to do drugs knowing the orifice it was coming out of. So I started seeing that, and also trying to hang on to the person that I am, which is I view myself as a good, kind person who's very fair and open-minded. So how do I make that balance? How do I balance this dichotomy of seeing the ugly, soulless part of humanity, but yet still seeing the good? So I struggled with that, and I really just wanted to get down to the substrate. How do I still see that good? And it goes back to my judo roots, because essentially we're all the same. It's just a matter of how life affects you and what you do with it. So going forward in my law enforcement career, again, circling back, saying that and telling you about the person, there's a person behind that badge. There's a person that's just as scared as the person that you're talking to, but we have to put on airs. We have to put on a front, and we actually have the responsibility sometimes of showing the confidence in a situation to de-escalate a situation, so that if we show we're nervous, people are going to be terrified. So we have to remain calm, but your insides are all jittery as well.
Yeah,
so,
praying that it didn't make the wrong decision, that it did the right things, departmental policy-wise and on the street-wise. Look, you couldn't be the Barney Fife kind of guy. That just was not allowed. You had to be certain about what you're doing. If it was, I'll give you a great example. There was an incident where I got smoke inhalation, and I was driving the street and I saw a roof on fire, and then I saw people started knocking on the door, and I saw people inside, and they're all special needs. They were intellectually disabled, for whatever term is correct term nowadays, and they didn't want to open the door for me. I had to bust in, and I had to start taking people out. You can't be second-guessing yourself when you've got a situation like that. You've got to act as if you know exactly what you're doing, and nothing trained me for that.
That's so true. Going to Hollywood, so nothing trains you for it. So Hollywood has done a much better job recently in some of the shows, although sometimes I can't watch a show because how do you go up the steps with your finger on the trigger pointed up at the steps? You're going to shoot your partner in the behind, but so Hollywood still needs to get a hold of that and have some really good consultants. But also the balance is the law enforcement officer has to take on the responsibility to not take on the Hollywood persona and stay true to who they are, stay true to themselves. So there's really an equal balance of that. And yes, you're not taught about certain things. You're given the basic needs of what you have to learn in the academy. You're given the rules. Everything else is what you accumulate in your own toolbox. And that's where additional training comes into play. And that's also where if you do some extra for yourself, if you really practice some gratitudes and really keep yourself grounded, you can actually have a very fulfilling career and still come out of this without being that salty, grumpy person.
One of the things that we're going to get into is the events at 9/11 and how it impacted all of us. And Jean was there, and Dr. Jean had a unique role that many people can't even begin to imagine. I'm one of those people. We'll talk about that in a moment. But before we get to that, there's basics of criminal investigation that we're all taught from day one. And just for the benefit of you listening, we examine the crime scene at first, and we start taking in all the evidence, protect the scene, and then work your way out from there. So that's kind of universal, no matter where you're at, and no matter what level you go to. When you get criminal investigations on a federal level, whether it be major narcotic smugglers or human smuggling or whatever it might be, you pretty much have to do the same thing, don't you?
You absolutely do. And one of the things that's so important to an investigation is to stay away from confirmation bias. I'm going to bounce back to Hollywood because so many times you hear the supervisor on a show say, well, you go get that guy and you prove that he did it. Well, that right there, that's confirmation bias. What we do is we find the facts. We don't go out and say, we're going to, we like this guy for doing this crime, so now we're going to prove that he did this crime or she did this crime. What we do, or at least I can say I pride myself in doing, is finding all of the facts and letting the facts play out the way they should. And, if you do an investigation and the person who you thought did the crime turns out that they didn't, well, mazel tov. They're not charged, and you keep investigating further and further. As you pull those facts together, that's where the justice system kicks in, and you analyze those facts, and then you can find out, ultimately the whodunit.
People have told me, and the best way I can describe this is you let the evidence lead you to who did the crime. And one of the easiest crimes to solve, and can be challenging at the same time, is homicide. Because the vast majority of time with homicide, it's someone that did it. And it's someone the victim is close to or someone they know and love and are very intimate with. So you usually start the investigation there and you start working your way out. So one of the things my wife and I see all the time on these television shows, especially the documentaries, is, well, they looked at the husband and he wouldn't let me go until blah, 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 blah. And that's the natural progression. When we return, we're going to talk about a major life-changing incident for many of us in the United States. Now, some people listening were too young. I was not. I can remember watching the attacks of 9/11 on television. I was retired from law enforcement. It has tremendously impacted me. And I know it's had a tremendous impact on Dr. Jean as well, because she's one of the investigators. We're going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. What is the Newsbreak app, and why should you follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app? Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app.
Do this quick test. Go to a job recruiting website and type in social media marketing and see how many jobs there are and what they are paying. Facebook alone has more than 3 billion registered users, and studies show that more than 68% of them use it every month. Learn how to use Facebook to significantly increase your reach. And you could earn an extra revenue source from Meta too, like I do. To do that, you need to know what to do and what not to do. Get step-by-step directions and tips. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return conversation with Dr. Jean Kanakogi, PhD, federal law enforcement officer, also co-author of the book Get Up and Fight. We'll talk about that again in a moment. I remember Dr. Jean being retired from police work. I was down in Delray Beach, Florida, and I saw on television the attacks of 9/11 and was just shocked that this was going on. And I'm going to fast forward to multiple years later. I was visiting New York City for work, and I went by, which back then, before they had the new construction finished, it was a big hole. And there were members of the NYPD there. And I wanted to say something to them. And I wanted to just say very simply, I'm a retired police sergeant, and I'm sorry for what you all went through. And I couldn't get the words out of my mouth because I started to burst out in tears. I still can't imagine the depth of the impact that had on the fire department, the police departments there, and everybody else. It was beyond traumatic. You wound up being one of the chief investigators of this.
Well, I was detailed to the Joint Terrorism Task Force immediately. They took all agents and they just dispersed agents into different parts of the task force. I was tasked with leading a team to go investigate leads that came in to investigate the attacks and the people who were responsible for the attacks. But what I also did is I was a part of the rescue recovery of digging on the pile. They called it the Bucket Brigade. And I should digress. It started as rescue recovery, but probably within 24 hours of the attacks, it just simply became recovery. And going back to that time, chasing down leads was very satisfying. My partner and I actually found Muhammad Atta's dentist in Brooklyn. And that we found to be very interesting, or at least one of the dentists. And of course, what we had to do was give the information up the chain. What we did was just find the facts and just provide the additional information. We couldn't investigate further because we had other leads to follow. But I was on that pile digging for about 6 straight months. And digging tirelessly, we formed what they call a bucket brigade, and that was a whole bunch of us on the pile of all of the towers that fell, and we were just pulling out debris, looking for remains, looking for evidence, looking for anything, really. You couldn't really define what you were looking for, and the things that still just are so clear, I can't believe it's nearly 20 years later, is the bell that used to ring before something would fall down again, or when they found an unstable section of the pile, how the bell would ring. When I was on that pile, pretty much the whole time, especially in the beginning, it was still on fire and still smoldering. And it was just so surreal. And just the other night, I was thinking about my office at that time. I was at 26 Federal Plaza, so just a few blocks away from Lower Manhattan. And I was thinking how eerily silent it was at night when I walked down Chambers Street, and how there were pieces of found fuselage on the street. There were cars that were just like little accordions and smashed on the street, and the dust, this fine gray dust that was just everywhere, in which I was covered as well daily, and how it was just getting you can't get that smell. You can't ever get away from that smell. And of course, certain things trigger that smell, like just kind of olfactory sense straight to the brain. And how I remember I had a cough after that. They called it the 9/11 cough. It was just this weird tick of a cough for several years that you'd always have to have some sort of a cough drop. But, one of the things that really haunts me from then is coming outside from digging on that pile, being completely mentally and physically exhausted, and then seeing family members hold up signs and pictures of their loved ones screaming at me because, of course, it said police or something in some insignia on me, screaming at me, did you see my loved one? Did you see this person? Did you see that person? And looking at me with such hope as if I could turn around and say, oh, yeah, I just saw him. He's fine. And I prayed that I could say that, but I knew I couldn't because when I came out from the confines of the area, I would walk and you would see the tons of the trailers on the side of the West Side Highway, which were morgues. And the temporary morgue, of course, was in Lower Manhattan. It was at, I think it was a Burger King down there. But just the thing that haunts me the most is I can't escape when I close my eyes is seeing these family members in such pain holding these signs up of their loved ones. And
we all want to be able to deliver great news. We all want to go into law enforcement to make a difference and save the world and all those things. And I'm not saying that to be sarcastic or critical. And that's what we really want to do. So I can't imagine being in your role, in your situation, and not being able to help them, not being able to give them the answers they want.
Not only not being able to give them the answer they want, but being the recipient of their anger because, of course, they were angry. They weren't at the stage of grieving yet. They were angry. How could their loved one just be taken from them at that split second? And where is their loved one? They had no answers. So I was the recipient, and we all were the recipients of their anger, but we were physically and mentally exhausted. And, you know, one of the investigations that I had during the day when I was hunting down leads was I had a landlady that complained and that called in and said that she had a whole bunch of Muslim men in one of her apartments, and they had suitcases, and they would meet every night, and there was just a lot of suspicious stuff going on. So she wanted us to come immediately. And of course, you know, at that time, you hear this type of, you know, suspicious people with suitcases like, oh my goodness, is another 9/11 attack being planned? What's going on? Well, I took a step back and I took a breath and I said, wait a minute. There's no way I'm going to run in hard charging because I'm not that woman's personal police officer. I'm not that woman's personal federal agent. She may be a concerned citizen, but also she may be motivated some other way. And I took a step back. I reviewed records. I reviewed logs. I reviewed the calls. And I went and I knocked on the door with my team. We talked to the resident, and we spoke with him, his family, and we spoke with other household members. Found out it was, yes, they were Muslim, and that had absolutely nothing to do with the call. They were not doing anything wrong. It was a landlord-tenant dispute, and she was trying to use 9/11 to exploit, because they were Muslim, to evict them because they were having a landlord-tenant dispute. And that really gave me another moment to pause to remind myself that we really have to stay fair. We can't be dictated by the knee-jerk reaction of the current events. We really have to have an open mind, be fair, and analyze and look at all the facts.
You're absolutely 100% correct. And, you know, we're out of time. I want to talk to you again about how one recovers and maintains some sense of normalcy after an event, a catastrophic, tragic event, an investigation like that. Before we leave, you are actively involved in many things, including co-authoring the book, Get Up and Fight, the memoir of Rusty Kanakogi. Where can people get that book?
You can get that book a couple of places. We're at www.rustykanakogi.com, and you can get the Kindle on Amazon. So the hardcover book, or actually the hardcover book's being released on March 30th for global release for Women's History Month. Right now we have the 40th anniversary of the First Women's World Championships book, where you can get an autographed copy from rustykanakogi.com.
And you're also the Director of Mental Health and Peer Support Services for Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. Where do people get more information about that?
Well, the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, by the way, FLEOA President Larry Cosme is a huge fan and a huge supporter. He listens to this show constantly when he works out. Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association has started finally this year, has been building up to get more mental health connections and bridge the gap and smash the stigma so that people can recover from traumatic incidents, people can get help through crisis. Right now, we're putting together what we can is for peer support, but we're also getting people into some mental health programs that they need. We're sending out e-blasts, we're writing letters, and we're actually working on some bipartisan bills to be able to promote confidentiality on a federal level.
Dr. Jean Kanakogi, thanks so much for all you've done. Thanks for your service, and thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. The Law Enforcement Talk radio show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.